I'm Kate Masters for the Frederick News Post, and this is Beyond the Ballot, a series of in-depth interviews with Frederick County's most recently elected officials. And I am here today with Councilwoman Jessica Fitzwater, and you are going into your second term on the County Council.
I am, yes.
Okay. Well, just to start off, tell me a little bit more about yourself. I think before we started filming, you were telling me that you're not originally from Frederick County.
So I grew up in Smithsburg, Maryland, so just over the mountain. Actually, my mom still lives in the house where I grew up on Worcester Road, so very close to the Frederick County, Washington County line. I went to Smithsburg schools, but my house was probably just almost as close to Worcester Elementary as it was to the Smithsburg schools. I absolutely loved growing up there. My childhood home is in the middle of the woods, 26 acres, old house in the middle of nowhere, close to the Appalachian Trail, and a really just beautiful place to grow up. So very grateful that I had that upbringing. I have some family that are from Frederick, my uncle and aunt, and so we came to Frederick a lot. It felt like coming to a big city whenever we came to downtown Frederick, and we went to either the Orchard or La Paz, because at the time those were kind of the big restaurants downtown, and it always felt like we were going somewhere big when we were coming over the mountain to come to Frederick. So
Okay. And then when did you move to Frederick full time?
I moved to Frederick after college. So I went to St. Mary's College of Maryland and studied music and got my teaching certification. And as soon as I graduated, I was hired by FCPS to teach music. So I've been teaching here 14 years. And I did live at home my first year teaching. So I've been in Frederick for 13 years.
Okay, that's exciting. And you said that your full-time job is at Oakdale Elementary School?
Yep, I've been there 14 years and absolutely love it. One of my favorite things about teaching music, obviously I'm very passionate about the arts and I enjoy teaching that content area, but I really love getting to know the kids year after year. So all of us who are specials teachers, which is art or music, PE or library, we get to have the kids in kindergarten and then in first and second. And so we really get to watch them grow and get to know them over the course of a few years, which is very special. If kids stay at Oakdale their whole careers, when they finish fifth grade, I've known them for pretty much half of their lives, which is really, I'm very honored to have the opportunity to have that kind of a relationship with the students and get to know siblings and families very well. So
yeah, do you still keep in touch with any of your former students?
I do. I try to go to as many performances at the feeder schools, like the middle and high schools, as I can to see kids who are still either dancing or singing or playing their instruments. And some kids will even send me emails to say, hey, just so you know, this show's coming up. And I can't make it to everything, but I try because it's just very exciting for me to see, if Oakdale High School is doing a big musical and getting to see my former students up there is just really cool. And when I decided to run for office and started knocking on doors, part of Oakdale School District overlaps with Council District 4. So knocking on doors of families that I know and seeing, kids that were down here and then they're home from college and they're, looking at them up here. And it was definitely a fun experience. And some of them were pleasantly surprised to see me knocking on their door, and that was kind of fun. So
yeah. And to sort of dive into your political experience, I know that you were part of the first class of Emerge Maryland, and that's an organization that trains Democratic women candidates how to run. Okay. And tell me a little bit about that and why you decided to get involved.
Sure. First of all, it was a phenomenal experience, and I would highly recommend it to any woman who is even remotely interested in getting involved politically and maybe in the future thinking about running for office. I was nervous about applying at first because running for office wasn't necessarily something I ever planned on doing or had in my, 5, 10, 15-year career plan for myself. But I became really involved in the local teachers association and FCTA when I was a pretty new teacher, and very quickly got involved also in the state and national education associations. And through some leadership opportunities there, I really learned how important it is to be politically active when you're an educator, because all of the decisions that are made for us about what we do every day and what's going to impact our livelihoods, our schedules, our students, what we teach, how we teach, almost all of those decisions are made by people who are elected, whether it's local, state, or federal levels. And that's sort of how I got bit by the political bug. And when Emerge was sort of just coming online, one of the people that encouraged me to apply was someone that I knew through the State Education Association. And I had started, attending a lot of Board of County Commissioner meetings, a lot of Board of Education meetings to just make sure I was informed on the local issues and, starting to speak at budget hearings and giving public comment and things like that. And that made me start to pay a lot more attention to other local decisions that were being made outside of education and recognizing the really huge impact that local elected officials have. So I was getting sort of more politically active at the same time as Emerge came on board, and I was able to apply to be in that first class. And even when I applied, I didn't know for sure that when I was going to run or what the right position or fit would be for me. But getting all of those tools in my toolkit that the program provided made a huge impact on me feeling like I was really ready to run when I did.
Okay. And were there any decisions happening in Frederick County at the same time that made you want to run?
So the Board of County Commissioners prior to 2014 definitely had a stance on public education that was not in line with my values. They were funding education at the bare minimum required by law and saying things publicly like, we won't put a penny over maintenance of effort, or if teachers want more money, they should buy Powerball tickets, or things that were pretty offensive to myself and those that are in my field. And I feel that education is really one of the most critical roles of our local government, but also just for our entire society and community. It is what makes all other professions possible if students get that good education. So that's definitely where it started. But starting to pay more attention to some land use decisions and how quickly a lot of residential development was being approved, the impact that would have on school overcrowding, on road safety and traffic congestion. That's definitely something that I was concerned about. And other things, cutting Head Start funding and rationalizing it by saying, mothers should just be able to stay home with their kids, and things that just seemed very out of touch with the community that I have really grown to love. And there also were no women at the time, nobody in my sort of age range. I didn't feel like myself and my peers were really being represented. And so for all those reasons, it seemed those were all good motivators, let me say that for deciding to run.
Yeah. And I think I read that at least during your first term, you were one of 2 women under 40 in Maryland to hold county council seats or county seats at all. Yeah. And how did that feel?
It definitely was exciting. I mean, I was a little bit nervous, I guess, when I first decided to run, that I might hit some, I guess, ageism or people thinking that I was, not qualified or too young or just not ready. But I was pleasantly surprised by the number of people out knocking on doors who were really excited to see somebody younger, someone my age, willing to step up. I think there's sort of an attitude, and I think it's changing now, but at the time, that there's just a lot of apathy in my generation towards government, towards politics, towards just community involvement in general. And I think for people to see someone my age willing to do the work and wanting to be involved was exciting. And especially, I would say, older women, I got a really good response from them saying, it's so great to see the next generation stepping up. So I think because I did have a lot of positive experiences like that talking to people, I didn't feel it didn't make me intimidated moving forward. It made me more excited. Yeah.
And 2018 has been a banner year congressionally, too, for female candidates.
Yes.
And is that something that you're kind of excited to see?
Oh, my gosh, absolutely. I mean, we knew this was going to be a big election year, and to see just the changing face of our elected officials at the federal level, and not just women, but more young women, more women of color, just more diversity of thought and experiences coming into our elected leadership is great. I mean, we have such a long way to go still to have true parity when you look at, our citizens and it really being representative, but it's very exciting to see it moving in the right direction.
Yeah. And going all the way back to the start of your first term, I know that one of your first acts was to support a bill that passed that abolished a 2012 piece of legislation that made English the official language of the Frederick County government. And tell me a little bit about that and why you wanted to support that.
So that was something that when it first occurred, it was kind of, I don't know if confusing is the right word, but it was a very odd action in the first place because it didn't seem to be solving any kind of problem. It was hard if you were kind of following the issue at the time to figure out what was the reason for this moving forward. What was the big issue that this English only or English official language ordinance needed to be in place. And when you actually dug into the issue, it really didn't have any teeth. There are a lot of other state and federal provisions that require local governments to provide translation services for certain types of government services. And so it just seemed to be more of sending a message. And to me, it was not a welcoming message. It wasn't what Frederick and Frederick County are really about. And when they initially had their public hearings, there were a lot of people who came out against it, but it passed anyway. And so it wasn't really doing anything of substance besides just sending a message about Frederick County that wasn't good for our citizens, that wasn't good for our businesses. And so when I heard a lot about it when I was running, but I already knew about the issue as well, just on my own. And it really seemed like something that we needed to take care of, that we needed to get the message out that Frederick is a welcoming community for everybody. And having something like that in the books wasn't necessary. So it was one of the first things that I worked on, crafting a resolution that would strike the ordinance. And I worked with many, many community partners, advocacy groups, Chamber of Commerce, business owners, community advocates to come together to say, look, this is the direction that we want Frederick County moving in.
Yeah. And I know, that bill attracted national attention.
It did.
And I think, there is a lot written about how the previous Board of Commissioners was trying to sort of cling to this good old boys mentality about Frederick County and what Frederick County is. And did that feel like something that you wanted to combat or had to combat going in?
It's certainly something that I wanted and still want to combat because I think things have changed since 2012, 2014 when we came in, but there's definitely still a lot of that mentality out there. And Frederick County is a growing county and a changing county, and I think that's a good thing. And I really like our county motto that we have right now of rich history, bright future, because I think it recognizes the vast, diverse history that we do have, but also says, we need to be looking at how we're going to keep pace with a changing, global society and making sure that things stay positive and bright for Frederick County in the future. And this just feels like that it was kind of all part of that.
Yeah. And I know a little more recently, you were also one of 4 council members who voted to restart the approval process for the Monrovia Town Center project. And was that also an important issue for you?
I don't know if I'd phrase it as restart the approval process, but that was actually something that we didn't choose to be one of the first things that the council had to look at. That was in the courts, and we had to sort of deal with what was given to us. Mm-hmm. It was a very challenging issue for us to have to tackle pretty early on in our first term because that particular development has such a peppered history, a very long history. And so we really just had to do the best that we could with the record that we had and the facts that we had before us. And that's why I voted the way that I did. And there are still aspects of that are tied up in legal discussions. And so it's just one of those things that's kind of out there that we get legal updates on occasionally, and we'll see kind of where it heads next.
Yeah. And more broadly, what are your thoughts on development in Frederick County and the pace of development? So
during the last 4 years, the first administration of County Executive Garner and the last council, so our very first go with charter government, we actually didn't approve any residential development, new residential growth, except for some senior housing in Urbana, which we know we still need a lot more senior housing, but no other residential growth besides that, because we really are dealing with the amount of growth that was approved very quickly by the prior board. Some of that we're starting to see, and some of it is still kind of in the pipeline and we won't see for a little while. we have to grow in order to stay a vibrant community, but we need to make sure we're growing in terms of bringing jobs to the county, not just building homes. And so I think right now we're in a place where we are focusing on that economic growth and bringing a more diversified jobs, more jobs that pay a living wage, high-paying, family-sustaining jobs. The county's done a great job with that. We have a very strong Office of Economic Development, and that's been one of County Executive Gardner's big focuses in her administration. So I think in terms of growth, that's where we need to see the county grow. And I'm not opposed to future residential growth, but I just think we need to be careful about where it's going to go. I'm assuming you'll have a question about livable Frederick in there somewhere, but that's really what I think that plan is going to help with, to help us really have a long-term vision for how the county should grow. So we're not stressing certain parts of the county that can't handle it, that we're thinking about, where does infrastructure already exist? And we're planning ahead so we know that our roads, our schools, and other public services can handle the growth as it comes, rather than having to, deal with issues as that come later because we weren't planning ahead and we weren't prepared.
Yeah, and I know that right now long-term agreements with developers, the development rights and responsibilities agreements, those still exist. Legislation that would have abolished those expired. So is that a concern for you?
I think that this council will be looking at revisiting the developer rights and responsibilities agreements, the DRRAs. The previous council never really came to consensus on how we should move forward with that. I think, depending who is in the executive seat and their policy, their sort of position on growth, will impact how much those are actually utilized, at least while the option stays on the table like it is right now. But I believe you will see this council take a look at that again and what should be done. Does it need to just disappear completely? Do there need to be different requirements and regulations that make the DRRAs more appropriate? Those are questions I think that we will be tackling.
Yeah. And then, of course, in terms of development, your district covers part of Frederick City. And I also know that you've supported the downtown hotel project. And why do you want to see that come to fruition?
That project, I think, is really going to be a great of great benefit to the city of Frederick and to the county's economy as a whole. If you talk to a lot of business owners in that part of the city, they recognize that it could really help to connect, the Shabro and East Street corridors, Patrick Street over to Market Street. We have such a vibrant downtown, but when there are definitely some spots that still remain isolated, even though they're very close to each other, it doesn't feel natural for people to walk those areas or to think about them as being connected. And I think having that type of project there could really help revitalize parts of East Street and connect them into more of the downtown space. We also don't have anything like that within the downtown area right now. And we know that we're a very attractive location tourism-wise, and many more businesses coming into the city and the county that would be able to take advantage of something like that. The county has not had much of a role recently in the project. There have been some changes at the city level, but right now the county's investment remains just for public infrastructure and really just for parking, helping with adding a parking deck. And I believe all but one of the parking decks in the city over the course of the years that they've been added have been joint city and county investments. So for the county to be, recognizing, hey, the city is our county seat. What's good for the city is usually good for the county. Let's partner with things like public parking or other public infrastructure. I think that makes sense. The county's not investing anything in the actual hotel or conference center, although that has been up for debate by many, but that's not part of the deal as of right now.
Yeah. And are you worried about the level of state funding the project will get?
I think now that, we're through this election cycle and and we have some a little bit of change in our state delegation, and they're getting ready to go to another session. I know that the county will be and the city will be advocating for state funding again. So I think that it's worth continuing to try to build on those partnerships and seeing what is available. The state funding is going to go to somewhere, to some county for a project that might help with their own local economy. And those are our tax dollars too. So we should be advocating for them.
Yeah. And do you worry? I know that I've heard some concern that the project might affect affordability in downtown Frederick, and especially in the corridor where it's going to land. And I mean, do you think that that's a valid concern, that more development could lead to higher prices?
When you say affordability, do you mean for rentals for homeowners or for businesses or just everything?
In terms of, rentals and property values.
Okay. I haven't done my own research into that or read much about that. I think it's definitely something that we should look into, but it's not something that I'm very well versed in.
Okay. And I know affordable housing just in general in Frederick is a concern to you. And do you still see it as a major barrier for the county?
So I believe that affordable housing countywide is something that should be one of our number one priorities. If you have, which I'm sure you have seen the most updated version of United Way's Alice report, and they're actually going to be coming out, I think I don't know if addendum is the right word, but an additional part of that in the late winter, early spring that will really dig down more into the local data, into the local Frederick County data. We have more than 1 in 3 families in Frederick County that are really unable to just meet that survival budget. Too much of their income, too high of a percent, is going towards housing right now. And we know that we also have so many of our, first responders, nurses, teachers, people working in the restaurant business or retail that aren't living here. They're living in Hagerstown or West Virginia or Pennsylvania, and they're commuting in. And it's good for us to have our workforce here living in the community and giving back into the community and really making Frederick their home. So I think it is something that we are going to have to continue to focus on for this term. It's a very workforce affordable housing is very, very complex because there are so many layers of funding that go into it at the federal, state, and local level that make sure that that these projects can become viable. Because when your rents are below market rate, there has to be some way for the developer to still be able to afford to build those units. And it's usually quite a complex sort of quilt of grants and programs and tax credits and other things coming together to make something possible. So I believe that we've seen some great projects starting to come online, and we just have to continue to make sure we have the right tools in our toolkit to attract those types of developments to Frederick County. I was very pleased with working with our former housing director, Jenny Short, during my first term, that we introduced a bill that actually changed some of our own local regulations on what the requirements were for workforce affordable housing. And we actually had the developers with Ballinger Run come back to the county to amend their own DRRA to, instead of paying the fee in lieu of affordable housing, they actually opted to build. And now there's going to be over 200 affordable units in the Ballinger Run neighborhood that weren't going to be there. So that's just one example of how legislatively we can make an impact. And I'm the liaison to the county's Affordable Housing Council and have worked very closely with them, not just staff, but also the volunteer members of that council. And we are continuing to look for other ways that we can incentivize affordable workforce housing or otherwise diversify the types of housing options that we have.
Yeah, and do you have any idea on what those incentives could be?
Well, we also approved in the last term changes to our accessory dwelling units ordinance, or sometimes called tiny homes, but there's lots of other sort of ways that could look. So we're going to keep looking for options like that. One of the things that I have started researching with staff is, I'm going to try not to get too far into the weeds here, but one of the tools that we have is something called a payment in lieu of taxes. And it's basically over the course of it varies from project to project, and it varies from county to county and other jurisdictions as well, how long they make these 10 years, 15, 20, where at the beginning they're paying a certain percentage of what the property tax would be, and as the years go on, they get closer to paying the full property tax. And it's another one of those tools to help make the projects viable. So the way that Frederick County does it is we negotiate each of those kind of separately per project based on the needs of that particular project. But there are some counties that have put in other incentives in that align with the county's priorities. For example, we could take a look at, all right, if you're building senior affordable housing, we can waive up to 100% of the property taxes for a longer term. Or if you're a nonprofit developer that's approved by the Department of Community Housing Development, that's a proven entity of working in this field, maybe you get a different type of incentive, so that we're attracting the types of housing that we want. We know not just affordable, but senior affordable housing is something that we really need.
Right.
And so I think those are the types of things that we can look at, and that's something that I've already started researching with staff. So
okay, and I wanted you've talked about that, and I wanted to give you the chance to brag a little bit more. But are there any other major accomplishments that you think came over your first term that you wanted to tout?
Sure. The one that I haven't gotten to talk about yet is the formation of our county's human trafficking task force. So this is actually something that some members of our local Commission for Women came to me with. There are quite a few other counties that have, over the course of the last few years, developed their own local task forces, and the state has a human trafficking task force as well. We are starting to see more research and more research showing that there were more incidents of this happening in and around Frederick County. And we know that it's one of the most underreported crimes. So the data that we do have is probably only scratching the surface of what we're really seeing. So the idea was to get a group of local people together that have knowledge in this area, that are potentially going to interact with victims of human trafficking, and get everyone around the same table and say, okay, what are we doing now? Is it working? What are other jurisdictions doing that is working that we could modify that makes sense for Frederick County? So we spent a year on the task force sort of researching. We split into committees that focused on legislative items, education and outreach, community protocols, things like that. So we could find what those best practices would look like for Frederick County. I was really proud of our final report because it was a culmination of the work of many dedicated volunteers, but it also had very distinct action steps. So it wasn't just something that was going to sit on someone's desk and we made our report and that's it. It really had a plan for how we would move forward. And so since then, the council has actually acted on 3 bills pertaining to human trafficking that I brought forward with the work of a lot of community stakeholders as well. And we also have a human trafficking response team, similar to some other teams we have for sexual assault and for some of our child advocacy centered issues. And this team specifically focuses on how we're handling human trafficking in Frederick, and it's made up of representatives from law enforcement, the state's attorney's office, the hospital, Hartley House, and other organizations that interact with victims of domestic violence who also often can be human trafficking victims. And together they are continuing to meet, developing and sort of revising the protocols that the task force first put together, and making sure that we have when people interact with the potential victim, they're all asking the right questions, the same questions. A police officer or a detective knows who to call at a certain time of day or night if a victim needs X, Y, and Z. That's what this group is working on. And so the fact that that's still continuing, even though the task force is no longer meeting, is really exciting.
Yeah. And what are those bills that you introduced? And I think that they all passed. Is that correct?
They did all pass. So we did a lot of research onto legislative solutions that other jurisdictions had explored and what was working and what wasn't. There were more than 3 kind of on the table, but these were the 3 that seemed most relevant to Frederick County and seemed to be working well in other jurisdictions. So The three focused on one, mandatory training for hotel employees just about human trafficking, so that they know what to look for should something occur in their facility. It's one of the number one places that human trafficking happens, and that it happens in Frederick County. We worked with representatives from some of the local hotels because many of them were doing some training already, but others weren't. So we wanted to make sure the bill recognized training that was already happening and then provided opportunities for other hotels to be able to add that training in. Another one of the bills focused on adding a body works definition to our zoning ordinance so that if people are applying for a zoning certificate for a certain use, we are making sure we're defining what that use is. Some of the other cases of trafficking we've seen in Frederick County have been at massage salons or parlors that really are a front for trafficking. So that was the second. And the third holds property managers and landlords accountable if they've already been notified by law enforcement. They know that there is a tenant breaking either prostitution or human trafficking laws, and they've yet to take any action, then there would be a penalty. It recognizes that some of the actions that landlords and property managers can take time. And so if they've already started that process, they're already, on the right path. They would, of course, not be held accountable. But this is for those that could potentially be, turning a blind eye. They get their rent check. So that's what they're concerned about. They know something might be happening and they're not doing anything about it. We have seen from what I've heard from law enforcement a little bit more of that potential in the city. And so my next steps are going to be working with Mayor O'Connor and our Board of Aldermen for the city to be implementing similar bills to what the county did. Mayor O'Connor, when he was an alderman, was the Maryland Municipal League's representative, kind of the city representative on the task force. So he was actively involved in the task force's work on this. And so I know that there's a lot of support in the city to move these bills forward. We just haven't quite gotten there yet. So
yeah. And how did this become a priority for you?
It's something that I've just been learning more about myself and recognize that it's such an underreported crime and so many people don't really know what it even is and that it does exist in every community. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter your country of origin, your socioeconomic status, or where you live. This is something that can touch anybody who's in a vulnerable place. And so to me, and also as an educator, because we know that teens tend to be one of the categories of people that are most vulnerable, especially if they're dealing with depression or issues in their home life. Runaways and LGBTQ youth are particularly susceptible to human trafficking. So it's just something I was learning a lot more about. And at the same time, the Commission for Women and the Human Relations Commission have for quite a few years been doing educational events and activities in the community just to try to make sure the community understands what human trafficking is. And they felt like they really needed to see something more happen besides mm-hmm. just once a year, twice a year, little educational community activities, but really something that would have more oomph behind it. So when some of the Commission for Women members came to me and said, look, what can we do to make an official task force? I wrote the resolution in a way that used the council's limited powers to do that. The charter doesn't allow us to create standing committees or to create county boards and commissions, but we can put forward information-seeking sort of time-bound committees or groups, and that's what this was. So that's why it did last just for a year. It wasn't something that was, now and forever a new group, mm-hmm. but it was within the council's power to do something time-bound for fact-finding, and we were really proud that we were able to do so much research that would help move this forward.
Yeah, and I also know that obviously your first term coincided with the county's transition to charter government. Mm-hmm. And do you think that that presented any barriers or slowed down work for the council? Just sort of that transition process?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's no way that it couldn't. Whenever any government is transitioning to something like this, it's going to take time. And as we looked at other counties that had fairly recently transitioned and talked to their elected officials, we heard the same thing from everybody, that there are a lot of bumps in the road, there are wrinkles to iron out, and that it takes time. And even if you look back at the different discussions that our council had on rules of procedure and communication policies and how the executive and the legislative branches would work together. This is all brand new for Frederick County. It's so different than having that at-large Board of County Commissioners that had all executive and legislative power. It's just a very, very different structure. So it makes sense that it would take us some time to figure it out. And the Board of County Commissioners previously did not write a transition plan. There really wasn't any transition planning in terms of how to move into this. So we kind of got elected and sort of started building the plane as we were flying it in some ways. And so it certainly took us a long time to sort of get going legislatively, because there were just so many sort of nuts and bolts that we had to take care of first. And there were certainly growing pains. I mean, of the 8 of us, if you include the 7 council members and the county executive, 3 had been county commissioners before. So all 3 of them had both executive and legislative power, and now only had 1. And so they also had to get used to being in these jobs, but they're not the same job. And then there were 5 of us who were, brand new to it completely. So it definitely took some time to get things moving.
Yeah.
But I think that's okay.
Yeah. And I know that there was, of course, historically some tension between holdovers from the previous Board of Commissioners and new council members. And do you think that impeded progress at all, sort of that clash of personalities?
It absolutely impeded progress. I don't think there's any different way to answer that question. It was disappointing. I mean, there's probably a lot of other words besides disappointing that I could use to describe that sort of atmosphere that we were in. I was, when we got the election results in 2014 and we had a very split, I mean, if you include, again, the county executive, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, on the council 4-3, and then seeing how fairly quickly Council President Otis, I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was less than halfway through, I believe, our term, where he decided that he was going to become unaffiliated or independent. So really a fully split council. But I didn't view that as a negative thing when we were first elected, because Frederick County is very diverse. Really one of the points of the charter and moving to a council and moving to having some districts was to better represent Frederick County, to have that geographic representation, and to hopefully be a better representation of the diversity of thought that is in Frederick. So I think that's a good thing. We shouldn't always all agree on everything, but we never really had the opportunity to have that healthy debate and discussion, and being able to, say, hey, maybe this person doesn't agree with me, but they might change the way that I think about something because, they might be thinking about something from a different perspective than me. That's good, and we should want that. But there wasn't really much of a willingness of that. There was a lot of people sort of standing in their own corners and digging in their heels to make a point, and frankly obstructing at times, or being against something simply because of where the proposal came from, instead of considering issues and ideas really on their merit and being willing to compromise and being willing to, let your mind be changed a little bit. I am an eternal optimist. So when we first got elected, I was kind of hoping, this is good. There's a lot of diversity. Maybe a diversity of thought, at least. Maybe this is this is who Frederick County voted for. This is a good thing. But we definitely struggled to find that space very, very often in the last 4 years.
Yeah. And obviously now it's a new council, new term. And I know that you've said you've wanted to focus this term on what you called legislative priorities. So what are those priorities for you?
So I talked about affordable housing already. That's definitely something that I think we have to make a priority. So legislatively and really budget-wise as well, I advocated for more funding to go into our Housing Initiative Fund last year, and was very pleased that the county executive agreed, and she put in an additional almost about $500,000 of recordation tax revenue into our Housing Initiative Fund, which goes into all sorts of different housing programs that help with home ownership, that help to bring new affordable housing projects online. But it was a policy decision. It wasn't a dedicated source of revenue. It's not something that every year X amount is going to go into this fund. It was a one-time thing. I hope that is something that is also a priority for the county executive again this year. But I'm going to be looking for ways that we could potentially legislatively, mandate that a certain percentage, whether it is from recordation tax, whether it is from some other source of revenue, is going into that housing initiative fund. Because not having that predictability and having that dedicated stream of revenue makes it much harder for us to plan into the future, to know what kind of incentives we're able to offer to really make affordable housing a priority. So that's something that I want to be working on rather quickly. And like I said, just looking for other tools in the toolkit. I think that seeing Livable Frederick move forward is also going to be a priority for many of us on the council. It's it's still, I suppose, somewhat controversial for some because it's such a different way of planning for the future than what the county has done in the past. When the county executive and some of the planning staff started this process, they made the deliberate decision to do the planning document first and not along with the maps that really focus on different zones and how we're going to have what these different areas are in the county are going to be coded, so that we're really looking at a vision, in 20 years, in 30 years, ideally, what does Frederick County look like? And if it's backward mapping, basically. If we can really get that vision that everybody in the community is on board with, then we can make those regulatory and policy and legislative decisions that are needed to get us there. The Livable Frederick Plan also looks at a lot of issues that some people may say are peripheral to planning and growth. But if you look at that as a visionary document, considering things like public health and arts and culture and, seniors aging in place and our local economy and all those things, that plays into what kind of place we want Frederick County to be in the future. And growth and development decisions affect that as well. So I think it's good that we're taking this more holistic approach. I know that the Planning Commission is sort of wrapping up their second big go-around with this. They've taken a lot of public comment into consideration, and I anticipate by the spring we'll probably be seeing it and getting our own public process going. So I would really like to see a strong plan that has support of the majority of the community move forward within this term. As well.
Yeah. And I know you've mentioned before that you thought the plan might, be a little scary to people or controversial. And so where does that controversy come from, do you think?
I think mostly just because it is so different than what we've done in the past. And I know that there are some community groups that maybe felt like they didn't have as much input as they would have liked. But I think our planning staff and the volunteers that were serving on different committees to sort of get this plan going really worked hard to engage the community more than has ever been done before in a comprehensive plan, in terms of having community meetings in various parts of the county, online surveys, doing presentations at many community groups. I think some groups felt like their group got the presentation later than they should have. It is very hard to please everybody, and I think that some of those concerns have been recognized now, and there has been more opportunity for public input. It's going through the second round with the Planning Commission. We'll still have an entire public process where people can bring us concerns, suggestions. So I think as long as we maintain a transparent process that really involves the community, then moving forward with the plan is a win-win for everybody. Okay.
Well, and also speaking of controversy, the Monocacy River Plan became a hugely controversial issue, especially, right at the tail end of, the first term for the first council. And I guess just right off the bat, do you think that you'll approve the plan as it's currently written?
Well, I guess I'm still not sure if that is actually the plan that's going to come before us or not, because it is my understanding that it's still going to go through the Planning Commission again with the changes that have come from the River Board, and they may be making other changes or recommendations. So it's hard for me to fully answer that since I'm not exactly sure what format we're going to end up with. I had a lot of concerns about the changes that were made most recently, and when we had our workshop on it, it was, I guess, one of our last meetings, I wasn't thrilled about the way that came about. We have a staff liaison to the board that was not asked to be part of that workshop, so we weren't able to ask him any questions. And some of the responses that I received to questions that I asked, I was not satisfied with them. I didn't feel like the reasoning really made sense to me. For example, I don't remember what chapter it was in, but there was a section that referred to our county comprehensive plan and went through the themes and goals of our current plan, because until anything with Libblewill Frederick moves forward, we're of course operating under our current comprehensive plan. And the board just struck out almost all mention of that, but left in Carroll County's references to their comprehensive plan. And it just seemed very strange to me that this is a document that is how, a document for how we should be taking care of our river. It does tie into other plans that the county already has, and to just strike mentions of them because you didn't like the wording of it when that is the wording of the plan. I don't think that's the right approach for something that is an official county document, an official county plan. So I definitely still have some concerns, but I think I'm just sort of waiting to see what happens with the Planning Commission and sort of how it next comes to us. And we do have different council leadership now, and we'll see kind of how people decide to move forward.
Yeah. And are there other concerns that you have? Because I know that there's a lot of discussion about, say, changing the word corridor to areas and just like the whole language of the plan itself.
Well, I'm not sure and I did not attend the Monocacy River Board meeting, so I'm just speaking from the experience that I have with the questions that I asked. But I wasn't quite sure what the reasoning behind changing corridor to area, what the actual tangible impact of that was going to be. Mm-hmm. And we had others during public comment come to us and say it should be a corridor plan. There should actually be more of the sort of tributaries that go into the Monocacy should be considered. And so we took this word corridor and we made it area. Well, how is area defined? No one could really define that. So there are still just there's a lot of gray area. And I just don't think that's ever a good thing to have too much of that in something that's supposed to be a guiding document for the county.
Yeah. And do you think that the concerns of some of the landowners who are afraid that the plan will kind of supersede their rights, do you think that those are valid?
I think we have to listen to all the concerns of our constituents. And I do believe at the beginning of this process in the initial plan, which is quite different than what we have now, there were some overreaching aspects, and those were rightly brought up, mm-hmm. and they were changed. And that is how a public process should work. So I think a lot of the concern is holdover from some of those things that were in the plan that really aren't there anymore. And to be completely frank, some of my former colleagues on the council seem to get joy out of, stirring up the fear and really stoking the fire and making some of these concerns into this whole other beast, if that's the right word, that I'm not sure we're ever really, I know they were never the intent of the plan, and I'm not sure that you could read some of those sections of the plan and really see that. I think that good edits have been made and were made early on in the process when some of those concerns were brought up. But I do want to make sure that, even if it's as simple as putting in a statement at the beginning that just, declares, which we tried to do via resolution, and that whole idea got shot down as well. But really declares like this plan is not to, infringe on property rights. This plan is not about eminent domain. This plan is not about taking of land without compensation. All those things. The plan is not about that. But if other statements need to be added for that to be more clear, I think that's something we'll have to look at.
Okay. And then in terms of other plans, I know that you sat on the board for the Frederick Arts Council, mm-hmm. And they recently introduced a master public art plan that was pretty extensive. Mm-hmm. I did a story about it. And do you support that plan? Like, have you read through it at all?
I have only peripherally seen the plan. I'm actually, I'm going to be meeting with the director of the Arts Council, County Executive Gardner, and some others about the plan in January. It's a tough time right now when the plan came out to when we're transitioning and it's the holidays. space to kind of get everyone on the same page. I did attend several of the meetings, the public art planning meetings early on in the process, but I did not attend all of them. Most of them are during the day. I have a full-time teaching job, so I tried to stay up to date, but I'm not fully up to date on the entire plan. We know that the arts are one of the big draws to Frederick City and Frederick County, but we have never really been super intentional about that, at least from the city and county government perspective. It's really been local individual artists who are willing to, find grant funding or start these really great projects that then benefit the entire city and county. And I think the idea of having a public arts master plan that the county and the city are real stakeholders in, and not just, touting that we make these lists, but actually putting our resources where our mouths are, I think that's a positive. So I'm looking forward to learning more about the plan and to advocating for how Frederick County can be as involved as possible.
Yeah, and I know another big project, especially over the past year, has been the development, still sort of tentative right now, but about a 24-hour detox center in Frederick County. So moving forward, how do you want to help facilitate that? Because I know that you've supported it.
I absolutely think we need something like that in Frederick County. It's been shown over and over again that that's one of the big gaps that we have. I have heard concerns from some about whether the proposed location is the right place. I am not involved on the council side. We're not involved in the RFP process, the request for proposal process. We're not involved in selecting somebody. That is all on the administrative side. So our role doesn't really come until a little bit later, our official role. But I look forward to when it does come to us, we'll have our own public process on it as well so that we can hear from the community, is this the right, because again, we still don't know who is, I don't know, exactly how the request for proposal process ended up working out, but I know that they're getting close. So I look forward to just hearing more from the public and seeing if we can make sure that we're at least starting to fill that need that is definitely here in Frederick County.
Yeah, and do you think there are other gaps when it comes to combating the opioid epidemic that we're seeing in Frederick?
It's such a heartbreaking and complex issue that touches so many. As we know, it does not see color or economic status. It's touched all parts of our county and our state and the country. And it's something that we owe it to our citizens to be looking at how the county can be more involved. So I think, as I said, the detox center is one step. I know that our health department and even, fire and rescue services, they're starting to try to track things differently. We're looking at things like repeat callers, trying to get more resources out there, trying to connect people to better resources. I know the health department's been really ramping up their naloxone, Narcan training and trying to get that into the hands of more folks. So there are steps being taken. Is it enough? Are they the right steps? I think we've got a lot of great people on our county staff that are working towards that and deciding, what else do we need to do. But it is something that I think the county still needs to continue to work on.
Okay. Well, Jessica, we've talked a lot about politics, and I wanted to give you the chance to talk a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. So
I was just wondering, could you tell me a little bit more about your family?
Sure.
Okay.
I was sort of hoping you might ask something about that. So, I'll talk a little bit about my parents and how I was raised, but also my husband and my son Jonah. So I mentioned earlier that I'm from Smithsburg, and I just loved growing up in such a beautiful part of the state. Like I said, in the middle of the woods. It definitely is a big part of how I grew up. We didn't have cable TV. We barely got any TV. So I was sort of maybe a little sheltered from some more popular culture. I didn't, watch a lot of TV, but I loved being outdoors. My father's a musician, and so I've been playing music since I was very, very little, and music's been a huge part of my upbringing. And so my passion for the arts really came very naturally to me that way. My mom is a retired special education teacher, and I have a lot of teachers in my family, so kind of going down the path of becoming a music educator sort of made sense to me. So that had a big impact on sort of the career direction that I took. And then I'm so pleased that I ended up in Frederick. I applied to quite a few counties leaving college, but I knew Frederick already from living so close and having some family here, and just immediately, really fell in love with the school system and fell in love with living in Frederick. When I first moved here, I lived downtown for a few years and loved just being able to walk to so many amazing places. And met my husband probably 10 or 11 years ago, 12 years ago.
Okay.
And so we've both been living in Frederick since, and we got married a little over 6 years ago. We were married in Williamsport at the Springfield barn out there, which is just a beautiful historic barn. We've been living in Frederick together for quite a while. Just this summer, we had lived in a townhome previously, but we bought a new house in Riverwalk over in Fredericktown Village. So I think it's going to be our hopefully forever home, a while home. It's beautiful. We love the area. And we had our first child, Jonah, about 2.5 years ago. He is hilarious and extremely talkative. He loves to sing. We obviously sing and play music a lot, so that's not a surprise. But it certainly was a little more complicated running for office this time around with having a toddler at home. I still got out knocking on doors a lot, but it was a little bit, life was definitely busier, not only because I was serving on the council and still teaching and candidate and mommy and wife. So felt like I was wearing a lot of hats. But luckily, I was still able to run a good campaign, and my husband didn't want to kill me by the end of it, so that's a good thing. Like I said, my mom's a retired teacher, so she helps out with my son Jonah a lot, which we're very grateful for. And my father lives in Frederick. He actually works at the Weinberg Center for the Arts, so a lot of people have met him. He works in the box office there.
Okay.
Still involved in the arts, and having him nearby too is just wonderful. And my husband, Gerald, he works at Flying Dog. He just started there this summer. Previously, he worked at American Public University out of Charlestown. He's really enjoying working for a local Frederick company, getting to know the people there, and really enjoying it so far. So I think we're in Frederick for the long haul. We love it here. And my other bit of news, in case people can't already tell, is that we're expecting our second child.
Oh my
in
gosh!
April. So yeah, it's becoming a little bit more obvious. I figured it was probably obvious to some at the swearing-in ceremony.
No one would ask, of course.
But of course, no one would ask. So I have let my colleagues on the council know, and of course, most of my students know, because children are not as nervous to ask about those types of things as adults are. So my colleagues at school and a lot of my kids at school know too, and we're very, very excited.
Okay.
So.
Do you know the gender yet?
We are actually going to be surprised. We did the same thing with our son. We didn't find out till he arrived, and we're going to be surprised this time around too.
Okay.
So.
Do you have any names picked out yet?
We sort of, but nothing that we're sharing. And really we still have some work to do on that front.
Okay. Well, I also have some rapid fire questions for you, if you're ready.
Sure.
Okay. So just to start.
Does that mean they're yes or no questions? Or
no, you can take you can take really as long to respond to them as you want, but they can also be quick responses. Okay. So just right off the bat, are you a dog person or a cat person?
We have a dog and 2 cats.
Okay.
And I love all of them. I don't know. People hate when you say, I don't know, or it depends, but I think it depends on the creature. I mean, we have the sweetest dog, and her name's Georgie. She's a medium-sized dog, and she's awesome. We adopted her. And we also have 2 cats, Oscar and Millie, although they're brother and sister. Oscar's orange tabby, and he can be a bit of a pain in the what. So sometimes I might say err on the dog side, just because one of our cats can be a troublemaker. But
okay, how does he make trouble?
Well, especially now that we have a kid, so we've got toys everywhere. All the little stuffed animals, he will get them out and bat them around, and he likes to do it in the middle of the night. If a door's closed for sleeping and he wants attention, he'll scratch and bat at the door. He just likes attention, so it's mostly attention-seeking behaviors.
Okay, I have an orange tabby too, who is very bad.
Yeah, I've learned that a lot of people's orange cats are the troublemakers.
Yeah, they always are. And then what about pie or cake? Pie. Pie? Okay. Do you have a favorite type of pie?
I would say like pumpkin or apple that has the like cinnamony spice to it. That's more my favorite than like a sweeter, fruitier one.
Okay.
I'm not a huge, well, let's say I'm not a huge dessert person. I guess I'm not a huge cake person because there tends to always be too much icing for me.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Do you have a favorite food in general?
Yeah, I would say pretty much anything in the Mexican food arena.
Okay.
So like guacamole and avocados, anything with beans and cheese on it. Just that would be my favorite. Or ice cream.
Okay. The one dessert you do like, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your astrological sign?
I'm a Capricorn.
Okay.
But that's basically all I can tell you.
Okay.
I've never been one to really follow that, so I don't really even know what the typical Capricorn personality traits are or whatever, because I've never really gotten into it. But yeah, Capricorn. My birthday is the day after Christmas, so it's next week.
Do you get like birthday and Christmas presents combined, or do you get two separate?
You know, I'm actually Jewish, so my father is not religious and my mom's Jewish. My mom's side of the family is all from Baltimore, and so I was raised Jewish and I would visit family for Christmas, but in our home we never celebrated Christmas. So I guess that was kind of a good thing with having your birthday the day after Christmas. Hanukkah's still usually in December, but it never really bothered me. I was always off school for my birthday, which was kind of nice. And most of my friends could always come to my birthday parties because usually people are ready for their kids to have some space away from their kids the day after Christmas. So I always had fun birthday parties growing up, and so.
Okay. And then I was also wondering if you could have dinner with 3 people, living or dead.
Oh my gosh.
Who would you want to have dinner with?
That is a very big question. That's hard to answer quickly.
You can take your time.
Okay.
No pressure.
All at the same time? Or
yeah, like a dinner party.
Huh. Okay. Holy moly. Wow, that is very hard. I've got 2.
Okay.
Thinking of my third. Because if this could really happen, you don't want to choose wrong. This would be a big opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to start with my 2, and hopefully the third one will come to me.
Okay.
So the first one, I would say it's kind of general, but would be one of my great or great grandmothers. On my mother's side. I just think the opportunity to ask questions of somebody who is one of your ancestors like that and learn a little bit more about your family history would be a really amazing opportunity.
Okay.
So the second person, which some people may not find a surprise, would be Hillary Clinton. I am a big fan of hers. I know that her candidacy had its ups and downs this last time around, but I have just always been amazed at her intelligence, her poise, and the way that she really, I think, inspired a lot of women who are now becoming, more empowered and more politically active and sort of taking their own experiences and stories and sort of bringing it to life. So those are the 2 that I thought of immediately.
Okay.
And then, I don't know. I'm going with I should probably go much farther deeper in history, but right now what's coming to my mind would be RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because she's pretty amazing and just another amazing role model for women. Been such a strong voice on the Supreme Court. And when she was recently hospitalized and, everyone was like, oh my gosh, you got to hang on.
Yeah.
She's back and she's just such a strong role model for so many too. And I'm sure a conversation with her would be just absolutely fascinating. So
yeah, 3 women at the dinner table.
yeah,
I like that.
I just had to go for that.
Yeah. And then what about a favorite book? Do you have a favorite book of all time?
I have a lot, but I have 2 that are always my go-to, and they're both from childhood. The first is The Giver by Lois Lowry, and the second is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle, which I have not seen either movie, which have come out fairly recently.
I haven't either.
I think it's because I just know they're not going to be as good as the books, and I don't want my version of those books to be tainted in some way, if that makes sense. But both of those books I've read many, many times and just had a very big impact on me, I think, as a kid, both in just the sort of messages of the stories, but also just how books can just like totally suck you into this whole other world and universe. And I read all the time. I still read, but I don't read nearly as much as I did when I was younger. I try to make time for it. But that was a huge part of my life growing up. I read all the time, and those books just were ones that I always went back to.
Okay. And when it comes to movies, do you have 3 favorite movies or 3 desert island movies that you'd bring if you were stranded?
Oh my gosh. I haven't seen a lot of movies recently because, toddler. So I don't even know the last time my husband and I went to see a movie in the movie theater. But 3 movies. Okay. I guess I'm not a huge movie buff because I don't have things like just, set in my mind. I would say, well, one is Wayne's World. Because it's hilarious and it's probably the movie I quote the most. I can pretty much just talk the whole movie with the movie. I'm actually very excited. The Flying Dog movie series at the Weinberg that is always going on. They're showing Wayne's World on my birthday next week. So we already got a babysitter and we're going with a few friends, and that's kind of cool. So that'd be one. Okay. I mean, it's such a ridiculous movie, but it's fun. Let's see. I don't know if I have 2 more. I want to say some type of musical, but all my favorite musicals are better on stage than they are in movie form. So I'm not really sure that can count.
Do you have a favorite musical?
Oh gosh, I have a lot. So I danced and did musical theater growing up, and my family, I already mentioned, like the arts were so important to us. So we didn't go to sporting events or games or as entertainment for a family. And a lot of our vacations every summer we go to New York and just go in the half price ticket line and see as many shows as we could, or sort of in our short trip. One of the first shows that I ever saw on Broadway was Footloose. Okay. And so that has really stuck with me because it was just one of my first experiences of seeing like a huge real Broadway production. I have a lot of musicals I like. You probably don't want me to keep talking about them. And I can't think of any more movies. I can't believe the one movie I mentioned is Wayne's World, but that's just what popped into my head. So
that's okay. Growing up, my parents, we had Wayne and Garth, and they were cats, and my parents named their cats.
Wow, okay. Well, so my dad was always the one that would watch the like dumb movies with us. We all the Austin Powers movies too were on like Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, like that whole vein we enjoyed. But my mom would rarely watch. And when we finally were like, Mom, this is like, we love this movie. We've seen it so many times. You got to watch it with us. We'd get her to sit down. And like, halfway through the movie, she'd say she needed to go to the bathroom or go get a snack. And she would just never come back. So we could never really get her on board with that genre. But but having your pets named Wayne and Garth means they were into it.
Yeah, they must have been. And then, this might not be as applicable now, but do you have an alcoholic drink of choice?
Yeah, so not right now, obviously. My husband started working at Flying Dog just right before I got pregnant, so that timing was kind of interesting. I would say I would say nowadays it's mostly like IPAs and good craft beer. I'm not too much of a mixed drink person, so.
Okay.
And good wine I'll drink too. So.
Yeah. And we've talked about it a little bit, and your love of the arts, but would you say that that's your biggest hobby outside the office?
So, I wish I had more time for it right now. So I play the violin. That's my main instrument. I've been playing since 5th grade. And when I was a music major in college, I was a music performance major. I wasn't a music education major. So I did all the ensemble, I was in chorus, I was in the orchestra, I took private lessons for violin, took lessons for piano, and, I also did all my music pedagogy courses for music education, but violin's always been my main instrument. My senior recital in high school and college was on violin. And I've actually played violin with the Frederick Symphony Orchestra for 12 years.
Wow.
So last year I only played in 1 or 2 concerts, and this season I'm not playing at all. I miss it a lot. For many years I was on the board of directors for the orchestra. I was the coordinator for their young artist competition and was very, very involved. And then as I got more involved in more political things and just other commitments, I stepped back from some of the leadership roles, but I still played in the orchestra, and I love it. And a little plug for them. If you've never gone to see the Frederick Symphony, it's a phenomenal group. It's a community orchestra, mostly of volunteers, but really great musicians, and the caliber and quality of the musicianship and the music, the repertoire has just improved year after year. Right now, just with having a young son and running for office again, we rehearse weekly, and it's just something I couldn't keep up with. But I know I can always go back, and I still play violin at home. Of course, it's a little different because I'm playing for Jonah, and sometimes he wants to grab the bow. And, I would take my violin to school and play for the kids when we're studying, instrument families. And our school concert was actually just yesterday, and I direct the chorus, but I also played with the 5th grade band and orchestra, so I played violin with them because I think it's good for my students to see that I still play. I'm a music teacher, but I also still play too. So I don't have, just recently with like life changes, quite as much time, but it's something that's very important to me. And going to hear live music and playing music at home is definitely something that is important.
Okay. And do you and your family have a favorite restaurant in Frederick?
Well, I would say in terms of where we go with Jonah, it's Family Meal because it's very, very close to our house. Our where we lived before was in the townhome in Frederick Town Village. We moved like a mile from our house this summer, and we could very easily walk to Family Meal, and we go there a lot. So that would be it. That's our go-to family place.
Okay, Family Meal. And I think you've answered this before, but do you have a favorite spot in Frederick County?
Frederick County is so beautiful, so I just feel like it's very hard to choose. When I first moved here, I lived downtown, so there's a lot of the downtown that I just love. Baker Park is beautiful, being able to walk up and down Patrick and Market Street, so I really do love that downtown quarter. I really enjoy hiking at Gambrel, and I haven't had as much hiking recently, but that's a place that we go to often. And a couple of the trails at the Monocacy Battlefield are also really beautiful, really nice. So we just have so many treasures in Frederick County. So I'd say those are some that I enjoy.
Okay. And I think the only other question I have for you is whether there are 3 things on your bucket list that you haven't done yet, but you want to cross off.
Probably. On my bucket list, definitely more travel. I have so many places I've never been, so just picking one I would just love to do more. I've been to Israel, and I've been to Italy twice with my music department in college, and Mexico, and other than that, around the United States. So there's just so much of the world that I haven't seen. So I'd love to make time in my life in the future for more of that. I guess. Anything else I can think of would just involve new experiences with family and getting to take Jonah and future kiddo on exciting adventures. I'm not one to say I want to go scuba diving or I want to go bungee jumping. Like I love my life here, so it's not that I'm not adventurous, but I feel like I don't have some of those like big don't know, I guess adventures in mind.
Okay. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with me this afternoon. I really
thanks
appreciate it.
for the opportunity.
Yeah,
it was really
my
nice.
pleasure.